Hello and welcome back to part two of our SpyMaster interview series, celebrating our 1 year anniversary and the 23rd anniversary of this week's film, 1998's The Avengers. And Cam, we foreshadowed it in the last episode where we spoke to the director of the film, Jeremiah Chechik, and I recommend anyone pops back and listens to that one if you haven't listened to it already. But who do we have joining us this week?
Yes, we are talking to Don MacPherson, the screenwriter of the 1998 Avengers film. He has the sole screenplay credit on that film. It's going to be a really interesting journey, I think, into how he wound up, a fairly new writer with the sole credit on this film, this major summer blockbuster. And was it supposed to be a blockbuster? So many questions to dive into, and I think Don is more than willing to give the answers to those burning questions.
So hop in the Bentley with us as we go for a ride and learn about the story behind the story of 1998's Avengers with the writer, Don MacPherson. Cam, roll that clip.
And joining us today, the writer of the film this week, which is The Avengers from 1998, we are joined by Don MacPherson. Don, thank you for joining us.
Hi, it's great to be here.
I see you're enjoying a glass of wine. That's a good start for a
Yes,
chat about Avengers.
It's 6 o'clock here. It's
yes.
tea time, but it is wine o'clock. So
I wish I could say the same, but I'm just on water currently.
okay.
So one thing when we're talking to people before we get into the particular film that we're covering of the week, we'd like to get a little bit of information on their background. So the first question we generally ask is, how did you get started in your case in screenwriting?
In my case, I was a film critic for Time Out magazine, which at one point was considered quite a big deal. So I was about 24, 25. But in reality, I'd been movie crazy for all through my teens and beyond. And when I was about 18, I hitchhiked down to the Cannes Film Festival. And to cut a long story short, I got to know very well the kids of an American screenwriter, Ben Barsman, who lived in Cannes and was one of the screenwriters to be thrown out of Hollywood during the McCarthy hearings. He'd worked with Joseph Losey and then worked with Anthony Mann and people in Europe. He was, I was movie crazy, but Ben was the first real screenwriter I'd ever met, because you don't really see them. And luckily for me, I knew a lot of the films he'd worked on, so I could chat with him. I thought he was fantastic. And then when he and his kids went back to LA, by then I was big friends with their family. I went out to LA and became friends with a lot of their kids and their generation of friends who'd been blacklisted, basically. So I knew that about, this strange creature called a screenwriter. But then in my own work over here, I was a journalist and a film critic. I found a book called Absolute Beginners, which I pressed upon a friend who was a director, Julian Temple, and another friend, Stephen Woolley, who was becoming a producer. And we ended up working on a film of that, which took a long, long while. And I worked on the music and on the script of that. And then after that, I had to make a choice and leap into this world of screenwriting on my own. So I decided to do that. I got some films made at the BBC. I did a film of a Sheridan Le Fanu novel called Uncle Silas with Peter O'Toole and Jane Lapeterre. And strangely, the director, Peter Hammond, had actually directed some of the early TV episodes of The Avengers by a strange thing. Anyway, I went on like that, and I started doing my own screenplays and got reasonably successful like that. And then one thing led to another, but I can tell you how they led from one thing to another. So basically, I was nuts about movies. Hollywood movies, French movies, all sorts of movies, all through my teens. And I wrote about them, I watched them. I would see like 30 movies a week, and it was my entire life. So I only stopped watching a ton of movies when I became a screenwriter, but I had basically a kind of a memory of so many movies in my head. And I also had a love of comic strips from when I was young. So everything that your mum and dad would tell you about having a wasted youth, about comic books, TV, and films, I managed to spend a lot of time doing, and then that's ended up being what I could do because I loved it.
Well, it seems like someone who has such a background in pop culture in this era and sort of comic book style seems perfectly suited to be adapting the Avengers, but the sort of the background leading into actually getting the job seems like a bit of a leap. How did you actually go about getting towards actually being attached to this property?
Well, I had written a script called Jonathan Wild, which had received a lot of attention. It got voted among the best unmade scripts in Hollywood in a certain year. The two other ones were Confessions of a Dangerous Mind by Charlie Kaufman, and I think it was Kafka by Lem Dobbs, which I think got made by Steven Soderbergh. And there was my Jonathan Wild. And Jodie Foster bought that and was on board. Neil Jordan was wanting to direct it after The Crying Game. And because of that, this rather eccentric, violent, very British, very cinematic script that I'd written went past all the sort of development people, and producers, heads of studios had to read what Neil Jordan wanted to do next. And bless him, it turned out to be this. So a lot of people read this, and I started getting, I won't say offers from Hollywood, but I got an offer and went over, and I started working at Warner Brothers. And I can tell you what I did there. But at Warner Brothers, the first script I got offered was The Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens. And I did a script with this. And my agent called me up one lunchtime and said, "You've won the Terry Gilliam lottery." And I said, "What's the Terry Gilliam lottery?" And they said, "He reads all the scripts from CAA, which is one of the big agencies in LA that I was with and that Terry was with. And out of all this pile of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of things, and he hates them all, he likes your script." And no one could work out why. It turned out I was living in Highgate in London, and I was living down the hill, he was living up the hill. So I ended up working for about a year with Terry on that film. It was for Mel Gibson. That didn't get made. I'd worked on another script, Frankenstein, which was for a great combo of Arnie Schwarzenegger and Tim Burton.
Perfect.
And Arnie didn't want to do it. He thought it was too highbrow. So that was that. And then basically I'd done these two scripts which had gone very well at Warner's, and to get scripts to that level of being enjoyed and liked, whatever. There was this other guy on the other side of the lot, Jerry Weintraub. The female producer I'd done these scripts for was a very esteemed, fantastic female producer, Paula Weinstein. And Jerry was, maybe he was the next office on the lot. But anyway, Paula and Jerry were complete opposites. Paula was female, left-wing, radical, former communist. I'd done all those scripts for her. She had, in fact, known this guy, Ben Barsman, that I met in France. Jerry was a Republican ex-music manager. He managed Frank Sinatra and Elvis, and big connections in Las Vegas, all these kinds of things. Anyway, Jerry loved the Avengers, and Jerry had a big library of about 500 or 1,000 titles, properties. And the thing he most wanted to make was the Avengers. He just loved this crazy English stuff. They've been trying to do it for a while. And one of his story editor, a guy called Matt Leipzig, had read my script to Jonathan Wild, and he wrote a kind of a love letter about it, because it was crazy and violent and just unlike all the other scripts there.
Right.
And he put me up for this, and Jerry said, well, let's have a meeting. And it turned out that a guy called Sam Hamm had done a script, who did the first version of the Batman movie. That hadn't worked out. It was very difficult. And really, they were still arguing just about the concept. How would you do the Avengers? How could you do the Avengers? It seemed, it was a property, and I think it was maybe just before the kind of craze of adapting TV things for movies. Now everything gets done, Man from U.N.C.L.E., Charlie's Angels, everything. But this was slightly before that. But they couldn't figure out what to do. Should it be set on Concorde, between London and America? Should turn them into American? I mean, they just couldn't figure out a way of doing it. So I, with the confidence of youth and the brashness of someone, and I have to say the arrogance, I said, well, it's about Mrs. Peel, and it's set in Avengers land. It's an entirely self-referential world. That's where it's set, and that's where all the action takes place. And to my amazement, they bought this. They thought this was a fantastic idea. Anyway, I hadn't, needless to say, thought of a story yet, but I was very clear on certain things about the TV show, which I had loved as a kid growing up in England, and I was very clear about what you could or couldn't do as a movie. I'm happy to go into that phase if you like. Should I go into them?
Well, I mean, the next question would be in that realm. My next question lined up was, what was your connection to the original Avengers show, which you said you have enjoyed?
I loved it, like all kids. I was brought up in Nottingham. I watched the TV avidly. I watched Danger Man, The Avengers, The Prisoner, everything. I watched everything, it has to be said. But The Avengers, like everyone, it was my favorite. I watched the first series. I didn't watch the later series, in fact. I didn't much like those. But like every teenager who'd ever seen Patrick Macnee and Diana Rigg, it was just fantastic. It was funny, witty, a little bit scary, a little bit trippy, quite dark, quite light. A whole absolutely unique mix of very British, very English things.
Well,
sorry, yeah, go on.
No, I was just going to ask then, before you get into how you got around adapting it, were you at all hesitant to take up this franchise that you obviously cared about as a young man when you were watching it in Nottingham? It's a big responsibility, and it's potentially your first big Hollywood film. That's a lot on your plate for the first project. Was there any hesitance, or were you just like, let's just do it?
I can remember my mindset. I hesitate to say it was the brashness of youth, or I hesitate to say the arrogance of youth, but it was definitely the brashness of youth. I had no hesitation at all. I had some connection in a strange way through the designer Anton Furst to Batman and how they'd made that, and I'd seen the script that they'd made of Batman. And with my love of comic books, it was obviously apparent that they had made the first Batman entirely from the sort of Frank Miller, reimagining of Batman, the Dark Knight.
Mm-hmm.
And they turned Batman from a rather, how can I say, sort of white bread kind of comic into this dark, epic, scary world of Gotham City and the Joker and the Penguin and everyone that we know that. But what they'd done in Batman, the cartoon characters, like in the 60s TV show, were entirely comic book cartoons. They had no depth at all. What they'd done was, which is very clever for Batman, was they'd said, how did Batman become Batman? How did Bruce Wayne become Batman? The answer in the Frank Miller books is that the world that he makes, that he draws, that he inks, that he illustrates, is really a reflection of Bruce Wayne's trauma at seeing his parents being killed. That's the thing that colors and darkens every action that Batman does. And so he's not even necessarily a good hero. He can be quite mixed. He can be light and dark. So he's very ambiguous and ambivalent. And it seemed to me that that darkness and that sort of trauma, if you like, that was so successful in the first Batman thing, I began to think that that was really the way you could do the Avengers. I thought that the TV series should remain as it is. That's there for anyone who wants to go to it. But for a big Hollywood movie, I thought the first thing I thought was that no one will understand the British situation, the world of the Avengers as such. It's too dense and too English. You have to have some goal or some sort of quest in a film story that's worth doing a movie out of. So I can remember when I was obviously being asked the $64 question, well, what is it about? My reasoning was that in the series, the attraction really is Mrs. Peel, especially the Diana Rigg Mrs. Peel. Who is she? Where is she from? You never know. You never find out. And you never actually find out why she is Mrs. Peel. Mm-hmm. You do see Peter Peel in one episode, but it's never really referred to. There is a lot of sexual tension between Steed and Emma Peel, but nothing, not a romance or anything. So I had, to my own mind, a terrific idea, which was I was going to do a really dark story of a Black Widow, Emma Peel, and a revenge movie about who killed her husband, Peter Peel. So the movie was going to be, and the first script was, who killed Peter Peel, Emma's husband. Emma has been traumatized and has been away from the world of science and of the secret services. But footage has emerged of someone who appears to be her laying waste to a top secret facility in England. And so the story was going to be to Steed, we want Emma Peel to come and answer questions about who's been doing this thing. We have pictures of her. She claims it's not her. We want you, Steed, to find out what's going on here and if Emma Peel is guilty or not. If she isn't guilty, we want to know what's happening, because to our minds, she seems crazy. But if she is guilty, Steed, we want you to kill her. So that was basically the story, which is a widow returns to the fray, accused of crimes against the state, and has to find out declare her innocence, has to fight to prove her innocence. If she's not innocent, Steed will kill her. So what it was going to be, and what the first script was about, was Emma Steed tracking down these, through these strange events that had been happening, trying to unravel the mystery of how her husband had been killed, who had killed him, and why these current strange events seem to be trying to drive her mad.
Right. So, okay, now this is really interesting because at this point in time, are they still looking at the Avengers as being like a summer blockbuster, or at this point, like, are you thinking of it more as more of a, you know, mid-tier budget sort of kind of esoteric adventure film?
It was absolutely not a summer blockbuster. If it was, I wouldn't have been writing it for a start. The way I pitched it to them, and which they understood it as, was as a, let's say, a kind of a French movie.
Right.
At that time, Warner's had a lot of big, mass audience hits. They had Lethal Weapon, they had Dirty Harry, they had Batman, they had even had JFK. In the records division, there was Prince and Madonna. This is a pretty good lineup, and certain people in the company wanted to extend their reach. Let's do something. We're Warner Brothers. We can do anything. Let's do something pretty crazy, but pretty high art, high end. Let's do it. Let's see where it's going. And if we can make Batman work, maybe we can do other things. So when I did the screenplay, the first director they went to was Jean-Jacques Binix, who did Diva. And that was a good fit, I thought. That was very good. I think there were some ructions between them in the studio, didn't work out. The next person was David Fincher, who I'd worked with on Alien 3. Did rewrites for him up at Pinewood while they were shooting the movie. I'd gone on well with him. He loved the script. And we went to see him on the set of Seven. During a scene they were filming with Morgan Freeman and Gwyneth Paltrow. He really loved the script, wanted to do it. A footnote is that Seven was the first movie he'd done since Alien 3 because he'd really been blackballed.
Yeah.
They didn't like him on Alien 3. And when I was working with him, I said to him, man, they were just trying to fire him, do anything to get him to stop. And I said, oh man, I just surprised you don't have a heart attack. And he said memorably, I don't get a heart attack, I give heart attacks. But Fincher was certainly like my child. Fincher was fantastic and had the balls and the guts and the take no prisoners attitude. And in fact, he did a commercial for a Honda car using bits of the script. I can send you that, but it's a very funny Avengers episode, sort of a half-minute commercial. But Fincher wanted to do it in black and white, of course, being Fincher. And the studio said, no. You're absolute trouble, Fincher, and you cost $3 million, and you're not going to take a blind bit of notice of what we say. Anyway, so they said no. And of course, that was before Seven was a hit. And even on the set of Seven, I thought David was fantastic, but I thought, oh my God, he's doing it again. This incredibly slow, lugubrious, dark, straight shit where nothing happens. I thought, oh my God, David, you're going to do it again. But anyway, Seven was a huge hit. So then they would have been pleading for him to do it. After David Fincher, they went to Alex Proyas, who had done The Crow, again, which is all very dark, fantastic film. Alex agreed to do it, but then he got the money to do a film of his called Dark City from his own. So he went off.
Good film.
Then we got a fantastic guy, Nicholas Meyer, who had done the Sherlock Holmes movie, 7% Solution, had done Star Trek movies, done a lot of stuff. He loved the script, and I spent a time with him working on it, and he loved the whole thing, and he had some personal issues at that time. The film got delayed. He ran out of steam and just said, I can't commit to this. Mike Newell was interested, and he said to me, the thing is, Don, it's about a woman in mourning, isn't it? And I said, well, yes, but don't tell the studio that, because they're, not really going to green light that. So he got it. But after this array of people, and this is by no means uncommon, obviously in LA and Hollywood, they have a property, they have a script that people like, that's adventurous, let's say, that's dark and has a lot of action stuff in it. Basically, Jeremiah arrived. Jeremiah was a really, really smart, more youthful kind of director who had been a very successful fashion photographer, commercials director, very, very savvy, loved the material, and seemed to provide a sort of a how can you say, a passport between the kind of hard-edged French art movie and the more commercially minded movie that obviously they would like to have. So Jeremiah seemed to satisfy both ends of the spectrum. And when I worked with Jeremiah, I'd gone on with Jeremiah very, very well. He really liked the script, and off we went. He cast Ray Fiennes and Uma Thurman and Sean Connery, and I thought, well, that's pretty good, So just to say that the thing then was that this was a very dark movie, a very a revenge movie, basically. And I don't know if you got a series of clips that I was sending you, but my influences for the script were the films by Mario Bava, Italian director, sort of horror and suspense director. Dario Argento, who did Suspiria. And Mario Bava did a great film, Danger Diabolique, which was a kind of a sexy spy spoof, I think they call it. But it was very surreal, very cerebral. And there's a French director, Georges Franju, who did a film called Judex, which has some terrific sequences, really, really beautiful things. So these were my influences, and these were what I'd, let's say, paying homage to in the script. Unfortunately, one big thing that happened was, since it was all around Who Killed Mr. Peel, and Emma goes on a crazed revenge mission to find the murderer, one of the first suggestions from Warner's and everybody was, when we started getting into serious discussions, was to do without the Mr. Peel plot.
Right.
So this is well, this is where it starts to get interesting in terms of the story, because we spoke to Jeremiah Chechik a couple of weeks ago.
All right.
So we spoke to him about the film as well, and charting the course of the film, it starts off as this as the script you're describing, with a revenge plot, quite dark, quite brooding by the sounds of it in its own way, and then you're courting people like David Fincher.
Yeah.
And then you move on to Jeremiah Chechik, director of National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation. Different sort of film, different kind of director. Was the script evolving along with this change, or was it still your script and they were courting different directors at the time?
Well, this is where the story does get interesting. I have no bones to pick with Jeremiah, because he was terrific. He worked super hard on this. He's bright, he's smart, he's super, super talented. And he's really been badly treated by both the press and the studio on this film. So my heart goes out to him, and he really fought for the film he was trying to make. As I say, if you did a film and then cut 50 minutes out of it, it wouldn't be surprising if there are some gaps. But
shocking.
Yes. So it's fair to say that there was a sort of transition going on. When they say evolving, at that time, after Nick Mayer got involved, but then he pulled out, they realized they couldn't film it in the summer of whatever year it was. It must have been 96 or something. So they put it back, I think, to 97. And they're trying to find a director, and found Jeremiah. So, but in that gap, what I didn't realize, I was completely isolated in London. I would go over and work on the script and have meetings and so forth. But you'd hand in your script, and it comes back with a thing saying, copyright Warner Brothers. That's part of the deal. It's not your script; it's Warner Brothers. They've paid for it, a property of Warner Brothers. Obviously that screenwriter is very well aware of that. What I hadn't realized was that when it says property of Warner Brothers, that's very much what they mean. It is ours, theirs, and we can do what we want with it. One of which things, to my amazement, was that they started to put bits from my script into other movies. There's a Batman film, I think it's Batman and Robin or something like that. Anyway, everyone read this script because it was, people loved the script. It was dark, it was wild, it was crazy, and it moved like blazes. It was pretty good, even though I say so myself. But they took stuff out and put them in Batman films. There were a couple of sequences that they put in a couple of the Batman films. They were developing at one of the other companies on the Warner Brothers lot. They were developing The Matrix. And if you've ever seen The Matrix, which I'm sure you will have, the Carrie-Anne Moss character is up on a rooftop in a leather suit for some reason, evading the cops or whatever. Mm-hmm. And years later, when I said, I wrote that, so they'd just taken something from the Avengers script and put it in the Matrix script. I have no idea why Carrie-Anne Moss is in a leather suit. I don't know, but there she is. So they'd taken like an Emma Peel episode and put it in there. And then I think in one of the Batman and Robin things, there's a kiss between doubles, two females in a maze or something.
I think, are you talking about maybe the Poison Ivy Batgirl stuff, perhaps?
Yes, which Uma played. And that was a sequence I'd written for the Avengers. There was another sequence in one of the Batman films, like another fight thing, I think. And I didn't see any of these films until much, much later. But as we would go through the process, as they say, the evolution, you'd get these strange requests, which is, it appears to me that Warner's had a problem, basically, that they were doing The Matrix and the Avengers. And basically, the Avengers was Matrixy. It was dark and all about revenge, and had women in tight black leather suits rampaging over rooftops trying to find, like a kung fu movie, which is how I'd done it. And they have the Avengers, and so I'm assuming at some point someone said we can have two scripts about a woman in a black leather suit going into an Alice in Wonderland world, but we can't have two. So one of these is going to have to change. So I assume at some point someone would have said, the Avengers, it's not a dark, crazy Alice in Wonderland revenge movie. It's a spy spoof,
right,
or whatever they said. And slowly you got things which, as I say, the Dr. Peel revenge story went. These scenes started to disappear. I said, why should that go? That's really, whatever. You're very naive at that point. And I said, you just don't think it's working. Anyway, it happens a lot, by the way. It's not like they picked on mine, but basically ideas travel in LA, in Hollywood. They travel within studios and they travel amongst competing producers. So if I didn't realize this until I started doctoring scripts, rewriting scripts. And I rewrote one of the first Godzilla remakes, which ended up being done by Roland Emmerich. And at that point in the Godzilla movie script, there was an entire sequence set underground with a tunnel and a flood and all this kind of stuff. Nothing to do with Godzilla or the people. And I said, well, that's got to go. It's like nothing to do with it. And it wasn't until later I realized the writers, whoever, had taken that scene from a different movie, a whole different movie, like a Sly Stallone movie, and they put it in the Godzilla movie. So that's by no means uncommon, but obviously as a relative naive. Also, I had a terrific agent at that time who represented a lot of very good writers and directors, and I'd come across a lot of pressure to change the characters to being Americans. And I said, well, there's no point in doing it American. How would you? Just wouldn't work from day one. It makes absolutely no sense in America. And said, oh yeah, but it'd be really great. There could be like spy people and like doing, anyway, it made no sense to me. But my agent represented a guy, J.J. Abrams. And lo and behold, like 18 months later, we get Alias,
right,
the TV episode, which is basically Emma Peel in America. You don't have to look too closely to see where that comes from.
No.
So anyway, while my script was lying around unmade, a lot of people took chunks out of it.
Right.
But in the evolution, it definitely went from this sort of dark revenge thing with like Georges Franju and Mario Bava and a touch of Zen kung fu films. It metamorphosed, let us say.
Right. Well,
the script was still pretty good by the time they were doing it. It was all at night, and a lot of the plot centered around a good Emma Peel and a bad Emma Peel. Because for my money, the interest in anything went out when Emma Peel wasn't on the screen. So I thought, well, what would be the only thing better than one Emma Peel? And the answer was two. So I made a plot with two Emma Peels. So anyway, it was just to say it was all set at night, and they'd be swishing around in the night. And did you see her? Did you not see her? Like a Mario Bava film or Judex and everything. And then on the production, they came and said, "Oh, by the way, we're not doing any night scenes." You go, "Oh, doesn't that take the entire point away?" Anyway, it was a process and an evolution, which more than once I handed in my notice and left. But I was persuaded by those I thought with more sense and less high-spirited defense of the motives for defending the script, that I should carry on, and because these things can last quite a long while,
oh, for sure.
Anyway, so it did evolve, as they say. But the script that Jeremiah shot from was a very good script. He did a terrific job in the movie. There's a trailer of the movie, which I remember I saw in a theater with Jeremiah, in fact, very early on, like 9 months before the thing is going to be released. And, we shot this fucking thing, and we looked at the trailer and we thought, wow, that looks pretty good.
It's what hooked me on the film. I saw it as a kid in the cinema. I was
Same.
like, I've got to see this. I've got to see this.
You saw the trailer. I don't think any of that appears in the film.
Yeah. So I have a question about the evolution, because,
yes.
You talked about how, Jeremiah brought in Sean Connery, and in the original script, De Winter is a fairly small part of the overall story, whereas Valentine Peel plays a much larger role. Was there maybe an attempt at a certain point just to kind of combine those two characters into one? How did that happen?
I can tell you very simply how it happened. The first script was basically Peter Peel's brother, Valentine Peel, had killed Peter Peel because he was obsessed with Emma, his brother's wife. Valentine Peel had been at school with John Steed. and they had appeared in a school production of The Tempest with Valentine Peel playing Prospero. All through Valentine's life, he never got the girl, he never got this, he never got that. So everything in Valentine's world, like the teddy bears and the childhood taunting, the games, everything was reliving this childhood, the sort of ruined world of childhood of his brother, which is why he killed him.
This makes so much more sense.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm having clarity.
Yes.
It's all coming together.
My script was pretty clear. From Emma's point of view, it's my husband died. I've gone nuts, but I have to come back now to clear my name. It's not bad enough that I'm still in grief, but I'm going to have to find the motherfucker who killed him just to clear my name. John Steed's thing was, wow, look at this. This is, was very hot to handle. She's obviously in grief. She's slightly nuts. She's incredibly daring. And my justification for Emma Peel's action, her action hero, was that she had a kind of death drive. She didn't care if she lived or died. What was important for her was to find out who killed her husband. And so the revelation of Valentine Peel, the brother, was a tricksy, he pretended to be three people, I think. And then eventually is revealed to be Valentine, the missing brother. Basically, I was told that this would not fly. It's got to be one guy. And at that point, I just said, well, I'm not doing that. Not only am I not doing that, I can't do that, and because it makes no sense. It's like doing Hamlet, but the dad's still alive. If there's no ghost haunting Hamlet, he doesn't give a shit. He's kind of, everything's okay. He's a prince. Like, who cares? Anyway, they took out the prince. They took out the ghost of Hamlet's father. They took out the ghost Peter Peel, making basically they took out what was, to my mind, all what we call in screenwriter terms the A story, which is what it's about. I'm trying to find out who killed my husband, and I'm going to go nuts until I find out. Steed is going to accompany her on this mission and tries to stop her killing herself. But if she is guilty of these crimes against her, he will have to kill her, which he doesn't want to do. But as I say, when you go to like one, what we were left with was the B story, which is the sort of science project, the kind of attempt to rule the world thing. And obviously, I wasn't so sure that was a great way to go.
Right.
Because it made no sense to me. I said I can. Eventually, after refusing to write it, I came around to the fact, well, they'll just get someone else in to do this. It's not like you storm off and then you take your pages with you. You storm off and then someone else rewrites it. So I decided to think, well, I could probably save, 70-80% of what makes it good, which I tried to do. And to my amazement, they managed to get it going and get it, into production. So the script that went into production was a much simpler, but maybe more straightforward and more doable script. I bowed to the idea that my version was a little too high art, let us say.
Right.
I had a list of questions, but learning all this sort of thrown me for a loop a little bit. I'm trying to compose myself.
I mean, by the way, I would be selling both myself and Jeremiah's self if I didn't say that. In all honesty, I got on very well with Jeremiah, and he had a job to do, which was to get my kind of crazy, nutty, dark script into production and out into the theaters. So he had his own mission, as it were. And he convinced me that there was a lot that we could do that was really good. And I don't have a quarrel with him at all. These things are very common.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously, to my mind, it was a shadow of what it would have been. So it was much lighter. But it still made sense.
That's the key. That's the key.
Yes.
One of the questions I had was jumps to mind. It sounds like from what I've read at the script you sent over and the chat we've had that Dr. Emma Peel was the main protagonist.
Yes,
she had the main story.
Yes.
Is that how you envisioned it? That it was Emma Peel absolutely. And then John Steed.
Yes, to my mind, there's no interest in John Steed. There's nothing in the movie. Patrick Macnee is fantastic, but he's not a character. John Steed isn't a character. He doesn't develop. No. Emma Peel doesn't really develop in the TV thing, but there's scope for development. And what I was wanting to do, did do, was have, which I think could have worked, was that Emma Peel was this black widow character, literally dressing in black, a widow, crazed by grief. And John Steed and her were in a kind of game of what they call courtly love, not Courtney love, but courtly love, which is a sort of medieval romance, whereby the knight is a protective and shielding character for a woman. And because I had I didn't know enough about Hollywood to cut my cloth towards what they like to measure, I just decided to make Emma Peel the heroine. And it would be fair to say that there was a lot of resistance to this in Warner's, and before and during and after the film was made. So you had, within Warner's, you had a lot of resistance to this high art, dark art film that they somehow have ended up trying to do. And they've also got a lot of problems about a kick-ass woman taking the lead. In later years, I mean, the script of the Avengers and the movie of the Avengers suffered. It's quite well documented by Jeremiah and others what happened in the post-production of this thing. But I like to think, perhaps with some delusions, but I like to think after the Avengers, people read it, everywhere, the scripts. After that, Quentin Tarantino got Uma Thurman to basically do the Avengers script as Kill Bill, which is, her husband dies and she goes on a mad rampage to find the killer with lots of kung fu parts in it. There was Alias, Jennifer Garner. And then later on, much later on, there was the Black Widow and a lot of Luc Besson movies and all that kind of stuff. So I think the script traveled. The film didn't. The film, which was pretty good, as I remember it. It was an interesting, very arty confection. Still quite sinister, quite paradoxical. When they started, I'm skipping a lot here, but they basically tried to, the film is like an LSD version of a spy story. It's like the crazed bits out of the Ipcress file and the Manchurian Candidate going on for like 90 minutes. It's like someone trying to find their way back out of the rabbit hole, back out of the Queen of Hearts courtroom. And if you don't know why Alice is there, the whole thing makes no sense. But I think also what happened is I was, you can imagine, I couldn't have been happier having Ralph Fiennes, Uma Thurman, as Emma Peel, Sean Connery, for goodness sake, as the baddie, as the villain, and he was great. I can tell you lots about him. But what I hadn't realized was that, like inside Warner's and in the marketing department, they regarded the entire project as something they couldn't possibly sell to anybody.
Yeah.
Rafe, who's like Laurence Olivier of his generation, they regarded as an effete, homosexual. Uma, they were always very suspicious of. She's New York. She's not really American. And my God, what's James Bond doing? In wearing makeup and stuff. It was like doing I tried to do a sort of dark European art movie, and what they thought it was like a sort of camp, queer, transgressive movie. It
Carry on spying or something like that.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I never could quite work out how they put something above $50 million into this. As you know, Warner Brothers is not known for lack of control, whatever else it's known for. I can assure you at every single point in this process, this script and every decision that Jeremiah took, every casting decision, everything was gone through 50 million times. And I can also assure you that to get a film script into even the prospect of getting a green light at Warner's is very, very difficult. It has to be pretty good. Because what you don't realize when you're not in the game, as I hadn't been, is that you think, oh, you do a great movie, they want to make it, they make it. What you don't realize is that if you've done a movie that people happen to like, whether or not it's good or not, I mean, obviously I thought it was fantastic, but for this fantastic script, it's going to get $50 million or whatever, that's $50 million that's taken away from someone else.
Sure.
So I never figured that, and I would say coming from Britain and being outside the whole process, it was a revelation, let us say. And as Jeremiah said, the one thing we all learned from it is you don't try to do a big art movie for Warner Brothers,
No.
Specifically, it was done as a very kind of like literally like a French movie, like Jean-Jacques Benix.
Yeah.
Jeremiah Chechik being Canadian, that was, I think Jeremiah was the nearest they wanted to go to France, but when they thought they wanted to do that, they really, nobody told the marketing department, nobody told, and so it, this sort of high-end, like a few theaters in New York and LA, college campus, a sort of a prestige movie for Warner, which wasn't, Warner's wasn't that studio, Dirty Harry, Lethal Weapon, Batman. The Warner's marketing department was like stuffing a goose full of food. They make foie gras there. They stuff that goose full, and then they release the movie, and it plays. They get several thousand things. This, like a few theaters in wherever it is. What happened was, as I recall, that I got the news they were thinking of releasing it in the summer, and I said, but they must be nuts. Like, this is, like December, kind of October kind of movie when it's cold. You're not going to have this as a summer. I believe other movies had dropped out, so ours was the one they were left with. So it's it's basically safe to say that the experience of making the film was a lot more like Alice in Wonderland than the script ever was.
Right. So I'm curious, the studio went in and edited out countless amounts of footage.
Yes.
And
Yes.
the final result was, I think, very confusing for a lot of film goers to keep track of.
Yes.
Now,
Yes.
have you watched that version of the movie?
I saw it once.
Okay. So I'm curious if, even though it's completely compromised at that state from what the original 2-hour cut was, were there any parts of the movie that maybe people who go back and watch it should hone in on as this was what the original vision was? Like moments that you look at when you see it and say, that's the movie I was making. A lot of this isn't, but those are kind of the moments that matter.
Long pause.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that there are moments, certainly. I always said to myself, like, man, if I can get Uma in a leather suit and Sean Connery in a teddy bear costume, my job's done. That was my attitude.
You've peaked.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like that's willingly doing that. And I have to say, Ralph Fiennes was fantastic all the way through. Uma was fantastic, and Sean Connery was a delight. He was full of vim and brio, and loved this kind of crazed villain that we all were, obviously super keen for him to play. But I would have to say that, to be honest, I can't really remember much. It's like having a child who has a very bad accident and then is reassembled into. But there are bits you kind of recognize, and but the process is so, to be honest, so agonizing, and the bits you have fond, cherished memories of. But the story was just taken away.
Yeah.
And the whole raison d'etre was taken away. And Mick Audsley, who was the editor, who I know well, he was just under the cosh. I think the cut was about 2 hours 10, 2 hours 15 with all the credits. So that would be about 135 minutes. It should have come down, but that would be, I think, like 45, 50 minutes longer than the cut that was sent out to theaters.
We've spoken with Jeremiah Chechik about his part of actually directing and the process of then editing and releasing the film, and the problems he encountered.
Yeah.
I have sort of two main questions. Now, this episode is coming out on the 23rd anniversary of the film being released in cinemas. So the first question I have for you was, obviously, your script went through all this process. Were you still around when they were shooting? Were you still assisting with rewrites and things like that on set, or were you done by the point they were shooting the film?
I was pretty much done. There were a few bits and pieces, but nothing much. What happened was, I think even the script that was approved for filming, I think I had to cut out a third, like about a month, 6 weeks before production.
This is crazy stuff to know that this script went through all these changes. But one thing we got from our chat with Jeremiah was that the atmosphere on set was a really positive one. Everyone really enjoyed making the film. It was just the arduous process afterwards.
Yes. Oh, absolutely, yes.
Was there any talk? Oh, go on. Go on.
Jeremiah had a very good atmosphere. He
Mhm.
brought a kind of quite a difficult cast together. It was we had a terrific team. Stuart Craig, the production designer, who went to do Harry Potter, has done many things. Roger Pratt, terrific cinematographer. Anthony Powell, wonderful costume designer. We really had the A team working on that, and it's fair to say, the director at that point is very much the captain of the ship. He sets the course and he sets the how you sail. And Jeremiah did very well. And it's a difficult film to make under any conditions. And he managed to improvise and do all the things you have to do as a director to keep it on track. What I would say is that when he was directing, everyone knew the film we were making. Patrick McNee, who'd written this special part for as someone invisible, he said the script was terrific and loved it. So I kind of don't, I don't have fears of, that it wasn't a good script. If Patrick McNee says it's good, then it's good. So it's making of it was, everyone knew the movie that they were making. It was a big but sort of arty, cerebral action movie where everything was visual, everything was cinematic. Stuart Craig did some fantastic sets. The whole thing was this dreamlike action movie, in my mind, and a lot of the action sequences that Jeremiah shot had that great thing. There's 2 or 3 sequences, some of which are in the trailer, some of which someone has reconstituted online, which are terrific. Like basically they cut out the first 15 minutes of the film.
That explains everything.
Yeah, it explains everything.
Well, the question I was sort of leading to with the atmosphere on set, was there any discussions of a sequel at all? I know it might be premature at the time, but everyone seemed to have been enjoying it and on that end. But did anyone talk to you about that?
I think everyone thought that if it went well, there would definitely be a sequel because Rafe and Uma, worked well together. There was a feeling that this was a way to make a sort of an arty action movie, but very British. And obviously there's a lot of attractions to doing that, really, this was a movie for the rest of the world, not for America,
Yeah.
Movie for France, Germany, Britain, Europe. It was, and New York and LA. It wasn't for the red states in America. They didn't get that memo, so it was, dare I say, bludgeoned into fitting into a box.
I think bludgeons is the apt word. That's exactly what happened to it. Hatcheted.
Nobody. Look, you have to be grown up about these things. It's not that you're sworn to silence or about omerta. There's no point in complaining about these things. Warner Brothers pays you. They pay you very well, and what they say it doesn't get contradicted. They run it. That's it. If you don't, you're just fired. You don't even, not even fired. You're just off. You're away. So you have to understand what the game is. What I was, I was exhausted, and then after, the production, and then I was a little bit in touch with Jeremiah as they were filming. I saw some rough cuts, which were great. So when it went off for previews, we were still very optimistic, but obviously when I heard what was happening, it was just a brutal process. And what I could not believe was that I remember there were things in the press. I remember I was away on holiday in the summer, and I read in the press, they're not showing the movie to people, critics and everything. And having been a film critic, I knew a lot of the people who were writing this stuff, and I thought, well, that's strange, but they haven't finished the film. It's like, and they certainly hadn't shown it to me. So it wasn't finished till very, very late, and it was rushed out. But what I feel sorry for Jeremiah and for a lot of the people who did very good work on that. The actors, all the technicians, the crew, everybody. There's a lot of very, very good work in there. For example, they wouldn't let Jeremiah do a director's cut. They wouldn't let him do a director's commentary, let alone me. They really pretended that it wasn't something they wanted to engage with at all. So basically, to let things like The Matrix breathe, this had to die. So it's a very ruthless game. You can't complain about it. That's what it is. But obviously, it's it's not a way to run a railroad, as they say. So it was a missed opportunity. I feel very sad that it didn't get its chance to play before an audience. That's show business, as they say. I used to rationalize it as, if this experience had only happened to me, that would be, I would feel paranoid, but it's very common, as I'm sure you know. But I always think of it as they summon the great chefs of Europe to make a hamburger. Is that they trawl everywhere for new tastes, new sensations, new tones, new sophistications of movies. They get, directors, stars, and in the end, what they just really want is just a burger. So it'd be a lot easier if they just said, "We want you to make a burger," and you say, "Yeah, I don't eat burgers."
Burgers aren't scary. Don't push any envelopes, do they?
Yeah. So they basically we gave a piece of filet mignon or steak tartare, which is not for everybody. Absolutely not for everybody. You know that. But they put it into a burger and it still tasted terrible. So it's a you grow up after that.
Well, I asked Jeremiah this question. I'd be curious on your insights, which is that at the time you're making this, a studio does not care at all about fandom, about how authentic it is to the source material. That is very much not the case now. Do you think a movie like this would have a far better chance of reaching the screen in its original vision, made in the modern day?
The short answer is yes, I do. I think it would be a very different movie-making experience. I'm not sure if it would ever have got greenlit, I suppose, because these things go in cycles, as we know. But I think that something that's happened recently. I think Zack Snyder recut, is it Justice League or something?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Because he regarded the version that had gone out as a betrayal and everything. They did a recut of that, and a journalist recently did an article on the Avengers because he had this great intuition, he had this great hunch, which was he looked at the Avengers and he thought, wow, this is fascinating, but it just doesn't make sense. Like, what happened here? And he found out a bit about what happened, and I think maybe he spoke with Jeremiah and people. And then he realized, oh, this is like Brazil before Terry Gilliam recut it. And obviously, I don't think Jeremiah would say it's as good as Brazil, or you can't say it's going to be like that. But it's definitely like that. It was quite a cream. I'd worked with Terry Gilliam, before doing the Avengers script and everything, and there was a big battle there. Jeremiah got steamrolled. That's the short way of doing it. He was sent to director's jail, and that's very cruel. He did a very good job, and I'm not saying it would have been like Brazil, but it was certainly quirky, strange. It had definitely had its own world, and bits of that are in the movie. Some of the sets are fantastic, some of the, but I would, even I couldn't think why people are dressed as teddy bears in a movie. I love that, but the idea that the villain is is acting out his revenge fantasies from his childhood in a sort of LSD-ish way might make some kind of sense.
I think you said it best. It just wasn't a hamburger.
Yeah. Yes, it wasn't a hamburger, and they wanted a hamburger. They didn't even want a hamburger with lots of spice on it. They wanted, they didn't want Thousand Island dressing. They didn't want, blue cheese. They just wanted a plain hamburger. So they really, when that happens to you, and it is something that happens to you, it's not something you instigate. You are just defeated. You have to recognize defeat. So a lot of people have been very courteous and good about because they know the script and they know Jeremiah. When a movie comes out, obviously everyone wants it to be a big hit. And strangely, it didn't make much money in the States. It got panned effectively. But actually, strangely, it still made a lot more money now than a lot of current movies do. So everything is relative. But I wish Jeremiah had been able to do a director's cut. I don't know where the footage is now, if there's even a chance of doing that. I know there was a campaign to do a director's cut. Warners are not known for their touchy-feely, sentimental view on things like director's cuts, so it will definitely be uphill. But I would, it happened to Jeremiah, it happened to Ridley Scott with Blade Runner, it happened to Terry Gilliam with Brazil, it happens to a lot of people. Ridley Scott could fight back, Terry Gilliam could fight back. It was very difficult for Jeremiah to get a voice,
Well, we spoke to Jeremiah about the same thing, and he said he would be on board. It's just that the film is in a vault somewhere, and much as Warner Brothers has done things like the Justice League, Snyder cut, as it were, it's just whether there be enough fandom there to support a remake, a re-envisioning of the Avengers. And just to say, much as myself and Cam, when we spoke about the movie on the episode this week, there were some things we weren't particularly flattering about, because as a film, it was quite confusing at times in the way it was portrayed. But knowing what went into making that film, it gives you a certain appreciation of what could have been.
Yes.
And that's, I extended this to Jeremiah, and I'll extend it to you as well. I think what was created to become the film was fantastic. I think it was a really great story that you came up with. It's just a shame what the studio did. Now, I'm not paid by them, so I can say that.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. It's you have to be grown up if you're a writer. It's not my $50 million, and that they can do. It's property of Warner Brothers, and there it is, for better or for worse. I do think that there is an appetite for seeing these things again and thinking how they were intended. Whether that happens ever, I don't know. But yeah, the film that's there is, it's like just fragments, offcuts, not even making as much sense as the trailer did.
Yeah.
So the trailer has a sense of what it was like, this happens a lot of times. It's tough, that's for sure. But if you read the original script, the script that went into production, all these kind of things, you start to get a picture. I'm sure I was speaking from Jeremiah. You start to get a feeling of what was intended and what was there to a larger extent.
Yeah, right.
Now, Don, before we wrap up, I did just want to touch on some more of your work, which is the Fleming TV series. Of course, we are a spy movie podcast, so how could we not talk about Ian Fleming?
Yes.
So just quickly run us through your involvement with that.
this was with a British production company, and I was involved at the beginning of the project, and I couldn't do it for whatever reason. I think I was busy or something. Another writer did episodes, did a first draft. They got it towards production and decided it didn't work. I read the script very quickly and agreed that it didn't work. And I worked with Matt Whitecross, the director, and we did a version which we thought did work. Ian Fleming was a very complicated guy. He was very, very British, very strange, very had a difficult relationship to reality and to fantasy all through his life. And obviously, as the creator of Bond, there's a lot of fascination in what his real life was like, and what also that he said had happened in his real life, which is not always the same.
Yeah. So, no comment.
Yes. Well, he was a fantasist, but in some very real places. And I think one of the pleasures, I think the script, when I came in, I wasn't a fan of it. It's very difficult to do in 3 or 4 hours to do someone's life, to get to the nub of it. But when I came in, I said I thought the script that was there was a bit like Biggles Goes to War, which I wasn't keen on. So I said I wanted to make it like Don Draper in 50 Shades of Grey. That was my idea. So you had someone like Don Draper, you had someone who wasn't really the person he pretended to be, and that it was all wrapped up in this emotional life of, literally sadomasochistic fantasies that he had with his various women, and then especially with his wife. The combination of that fantasy, that wartime experience, and particular, shall we say, psychosexual buzz that Fleming had, gave birth to Bond in the post-war era. And the team that did the project, Matt Whitecross especially, they did a terrific job. And again, that was a very sweet experience as opposed to the Avengers.
Dominic Cooper was great in that, actually.
Yeah.
As someone who has watched it, and I caught it on Sky Atlantic when it was out around the time, I think about 6 or 7 years ago at this point now. But I'm not sure if it's available in the States at all. But I imagine it should be.
It went out on BBC America. It got nominated for awards, I think. Dominic Cooper did a fantastic job. I think Tom Hiddleston was going to play it at one point. That would have been different. But the spy genre, as it keeps on giving, I like the screenwriter's life is like an iceberg. 9/10 is invisible. But among the projects I've been involved in, I did a script for John Woo, which was basically The Third Man, but set in Beijing.
Okay.
For Leonardo DiCaprio and Tobey Maguire. Leonardo DiCaprio as the kind of Harry Lime character, and Tobey Maguire as the Joseph Cotton character.
Oh wow!
So that sort of vanished into the Leonardo DiCaprio vault, I think. But that was great. John Woo, to work with him on a script is fantastic. Real understanding of filmmaking, just incredible experience. But alas, didn't get made.
Yeah.
There seems to be a running theme with the screenwriters we've spoken to so far. Is there's been good stuff I've done, but you've never seen it.
Yes,
never seen it.
Terrence Malick, all these films.
Well, you've led us on beautifully to sort of the final questions I always throw out to our guests, which is more about spy movies in general.
Yes.
So my first question to you is, what is your favorite spy movie?
I can answer that very easily, it is Goldfinger.
Oh, nice.
A million reasons. Like everyone, I'm a fan, especially of the first 3 Bond films, Dr. No, From Russia with Love, and Goldfinger. But Goldfinger brings there's a kind of a realism, a bravado, a confidence making in Connery, in villains, in Odd Job, everything, which is really at a high point. And even when you know that the car chases were done around Pinewood Studios and everything, it's fantastic. What I've liked going into, I found a list of all the movies that I saw in around about those times, and I saw everything like the Ipcress File, Quiller Memorandum, the Silencers, In Like Flint, everything. So I would watch everything, but Goldfinger remains the thing. And I should add, with honorable mention, more than honorable mention, all the Hitchcock spy movies, and including, although it's not technically a spy movie, North by Northwest, which I think gives the kind of blueprint for kind of modern storytelling of a spy movie. The combination of action and reaction in that is just fantastic.
It's a phenomenal film.
It's probably my choice of favorite spy movie apart from a Bond film.
Right. Yeah. I could talk for a long while of that. I have a soft spot for the European spot. Danger Diabolique. This is much more surreal thing. I have a soft spot for that. I like obviously I love the Ipcress File and everything. The thing of what I was going to say, and in regards with the Avengers as well, is that the Avengers, I think what they managed to do was they went beyond the sort of spy thing. When Danger Man went into The Prisoner, they did a lot of things the Avengers was doing, and they picked up on a lot of the British spy novel and movie has a lot of other genres inside it. A sort of quite a gothic thing, quite a horror thing. I think even Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy is a little bit Agatha Christie and a little bit fear of all these doubles inside this room. There's a sort of there's a lot of different things that go into a really good spy film. The best ones really manage to combine quite a few different things. But Goldfinger to me has it just has such a sort of confidence, and Ken Adams' work in that is just terrific. The sets are just phenomenal. I actually went. I'm someone I went to the Fontainebleau Hotel in Miami Beach, which is where the Bond sequence is played. I won't say to reenact that.
That's a humble brag right there. I think. Yeah.
But I was always fascinated by that. So, but Hitchcock and it seemed like those early Bond directors, Terence Young, Guy Hamilton, who'd been assistant director. Guy Hamilton, I saw in the credits, was assistant director on The Third Man. So there's a lot of these. The confidence that a lot of these guys had, and they were guys, that's for sure. The confidence that they had at movie making really hit a peak in things like The Third Man, Goldfinger. I saw The Spy Who Came In From the Cold, which is, I think, a Martin Ritt film. And although it isn't up there with the greats, it's again, it's terrific as a it's a counterpoint to the Bond extravaganzas. But do you expect me to talk Goldfinger? No, it's just fantastic. It's why the spy genre coming out of the Cold War, the war and the Cold War, and the Cuban Missile Crisis, the Philby, James Jesus Angleton, all these things. The good spy stories have something else going on. The sort of fear, paranoia, secrecy, the gothic sort of fear of the double, fear of the traitor, that thing. So I think, as I say, in my way, I was trying to channel all these things into my own scripts, and obviously it's a difficult step to go from one thing to another. But what doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
Well, sure. At least there wasn't any laser beams cutting teddy bears in half in Avengers.
Well, I'm sworn to secrecy.
Right. Well, that leads me on to the next question, really. And I think you may have answered it already, but who is your Bond?
Oh, well, Sean Connery.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's no one else for me. Not even in debate. I like some of the other films there. I don't know Rob and Neil, who write the current ones, and I was supposed to audition for the Bond, as a writer for the Bond things, but you had to do come up with 4 great ideas, Bond ideas. And I remember thinking, I'm not coming up with 4 great Bond ideas. If I could come up with one, if I got the gig, that would be fine. But so I always tease Rob and Neil, who write the Bond films very, very successfully, that I let them take the gig, and they've done super well at it, so I'm very happy for them. Although I would like DVD royalties, that's for sure.
And no kidding, who wouldn't, right?
Well, I'll propose a new question then.
Yes.
As you are a writer yourself,
Yeah.
if someone who owns an IP was to drop it on your lap today and say, I want a script of this particular protagonist, so a Bond, a Harry Palmer, anyone you want, pick a franchise and you have to write the next film, what would be the character you pick? Who would you want to run with?
Well, I personally, I would redo all the Bond films.
Redo?
Yes.
Mm.
If I was
Start from scratch. Casino Royale?
Yeah. Well, they did Casino Royale. That was, that
Twice.
was something they hadn't done. And I think that was very successful, because that's one of Rob and Neil's best things. But I think, like Dr. No, all these things, there's things you find in the books that that are terrific. He's a nutty writer. In fact, it's very difficult to read them without the movie Bond interfering. But the Fleming Bond is crazy. It's so I think there's definitely a way of doing those which are not stuck in the early 60s.
So you would bring them to a modern time?
Well, no, but the style. Because the world of sexuality and Connery embodies a lot of the qualities Fleming didn't know he wanted in a screen Bond. He's very existential. He thinks before he acts, but very swiftly. But he's very he moves well. Connery. I'll tell you another time, he talked a lot about making the James Bond movies, which obviously it was great fun to hear, and with some affection, as he would reminisce about Ursula and other people involved in those adventures. But I don't have a kind of they have redone or are redoing pretty much everything. Sherlock Holmes to Dracula to the Le Carre movies. It's difficult to find anyone that they haven't redone. So I would have to have a think about that. But I think you could definitely redo the Bond films.
Well, I mean, who knows? Maybe the Avengers will get another round.
Well, I think that one's probably, I wouldn't hold my breath on that one. No, I mean, it's very, very sad. It's very sad, and a lot of people did a lot of very, very good work. It's not evident what's on in the film on the DVD there that you watch, but you can't tell people, but there was a great script. But there was a very good script, and Jomai did a very good film out of it. So what happens after that is, it's working with one is difficult,
Right.
Well, I think that wraps up our discussion on Avengers today. But I do want to thank you, Don, for joining us. Of course, I know you're taking a good chunk of your day out to chat to us about this film, the 23-year-old film. So thank you for that. Is there anything you want to tell the listeners that you're up to at the moment? What is it you're working on right now?
I'm doing a TV series based on an H.G. Wells story, The Sleeper.
Oh, okay.
About a man who's been asleep for many years. And while he has been asleep, he has become the richest man in the world.
Oh.
And so this is a very modern take. The novel is 110, 120 years old. This is a very modern take on this. And it's a sort of mystery science fiction thing set in a future London. So I'm very keen on that. And I'm also doing another story about a kind of third manish kind of story, but about an old spy, a sort of Bond-like spy who's in retirement and is summoned to Istanbul to meet his son, who has just been killed in an accident, and mayhem ensues, let us say. So a conflict between someone who is out of the game and his son, who he didn't even know was in the game. So there's a lot of these kind of things still whirl around, you know.
Oh,
it sounds like we'll be having you back on in a couple of years' time to talk about this film then.
Yeah.
All I need is about 30 million. So
I've got about 10 quid. Does that help? I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, you know, I'll certainly take it. The listeners can all club together. We'll leave a sort of PayPal account at the end of the podcast, and also
GoFundMe page.
It would be very not done to give anything less than $1,000 or £1,000. So after that, it's up to whatever anyone wants.
We'll start a fund for the Avengers director's cut.
Yeah,
as well. Yeah,
I think it's knocking against a very closed door, but it's you'd like to think that they would want to let something which they made, which they put a lot of money into, to let it be seen finally in all its glory, and let people decide. You know, people are grown up now, and there's a whole story about the film, which I think adds to its thing. It's not a piece of entertainment that would be consumed. The movie theaters, as we know, are not even open, but it has it was an ambitious, wild and crazy, epic, and it's still out there in a vault somewhere. So, to my mind, it hasn't been released yet. So I'm
still waiting for it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, Don, again, thank you for joining us. We appreciate your time.
It's a pleasure. And obviously, if the strapline is that it's the Brazil of the 90s, I'd be very happy with that.
This was really interesting, like a guided tour through 90s studio filmmaking. So I very much enjoyed this. Thanks so much.
So it's a I'm not sure if it's a chamber of horrors or a universal tour. There's a few OK Corral and sort of Tombstone kind of things like that. But Jerry Weintraub, who made it, was shall we say a tower of strength, and he had been through many, many things. And in Hollywood, when something like this happens, anyone who's been through it, they don't fling things at you. They just say, "Welcome to the club."
Awesome.
There you have it, folks. That was our chat with Don MacPherson, telling us all about, well, what could have been with the story. And, you know, we had the pleasure of going through the original script with him. And, you know, it's a very different story.
Oh, yeah. I remember being really surprised up front that the Sean Connery character, who I believe has the name Merriweather in the original screenplay, I believe, was renamed to August de Winter. Boy, like, he wasn't even the main villain. There's so much to delve into there, and how much this movie was also envisioned very much as an Emma Peel exploration, as opposed to more of this kind of jovial two-hander as we wound up with in the final film.
You could say the studio didn't find the original version very appealing.
You could, but you really shouldn't.
I shouldn't make puns. I shouldn't make puns. But yeah, it was just a complete departure from what we got on the screen. And, again, it was a fascinating insight into, well, screenwriting in Hollywood, really, and just, the conception of a story and then it going through the process of being developed into a film. And, Don was involved pretty much all the way through, and had to make several changes to his story that I think by the end just muddied the vision. I love the idea of there being this, like, of Emma Peel being the lead. I think that's more interesting. Sorry, Ray Fiennes fans out there.
I also very much appreciated explanation as to the giant teddy bears that occupy much of this movie, because I remember sitting in the theater and being like, what is going on with this movie? And you could watch it now and have the same takeaway because it seems incoherent. But when you hear Don talk about the original vision of the villain, and how the teddy bears thing tied into it, him trying to relive his childhood, it's like, oh, this all makes sense. Like, I understand what he's going for. And I really enjoyed how he took us through the original story, the original focus of the film, and showed how all of these changes along the road that were made throughout production completely undid the elements that were baked in thematically throughout originally. Like, it makes them feel like these bizarre non sequiturs when originally they made a lot more sense and actually probably would have done a better job enriching the world of the Avengers versus actually seeming like they're constantly interfering with something.
And, if we're talking about the conception of the story, also the conception of the film was something we explored in the interview, talking about, like, the different directors that were involved before Jeremiah took over. David Fincher was in the picture. That's a different film, because that was how the film was originally pitched, as he described. It was never meant to be this big summer blockbuster. It was meant to be this kind of quirky British film.
Yeah.
Which the original script reads like, and I think the original cut, the longer cut, probably plays more like that too, just with a bigger budget. I still want to find that David Fincher Honda advert that he filmed for Avengers before he left the project. That's out there somewhere. But yeah, that's fascinating how it just went through all these evolutions.
Yeah, and just how the original vision of the story just did not make it across the finish line. And I very much appreciate him talking about how this was not intended to be a summer blockbuster. This was supposed to be a mid-budget, quirky adventure film that would probably be more of something aimed at a specific audience versus everyone. Like, the thing is, with the cost and the release date for this version of the Avengers, the 1998 film, it had to please everybody. And it was a property not really meant to please everybody, and a project that was intended to be very much kind of aimed at, shall we say, maybe like a geekier audience, like an audience that's really into something idiosyncratic, something quirky from their genre films. And the summer movie audiences are not those people.
No, he clearly envisioned it as more of the the Le Carres, the Daytons out there, that more sophisticated spy story. I just have an image in my head of Harry Palmer being chased by bees that I can't shake out of my head. I think that would have been a great follow-up. Maybe they would have had that on Horse Underwater if they ever made it. But you could tell that both, and this connects to the original interview, but Don and Jeremiah were both big fans of the original show. Patrick Macnee, Diana Rigg. And they both tried to stay true to the weirdness that is the Avengers and that sort of quaint British feeling. And I think it was just sort of swallowed up by the blockbuster machine that is Hollywood. But again, just going through some of these evolutions of, like, having 4 different Peels in the character, I think in total, crazy.
Yeah.
Maybe that was cut for a reason. Maybe that would have confused audiences. I understand that. But even in the version we get at the end, they shot plenty of scenes with 2 Emma Peels, and then we never really see most of it.
Yeah, it's a very confusing final version of what originally was a very specific, quirky film. Um, I also just really appreciate any chance we get to just talk through the process of writing one of these movies because it feels so personal when you hear Don talk about what he wanted to achieve, and it's too bad it didn't happen. But not an uncommon story with Hollywood screenwriters.
Yeah, I was just thinking about this. Can you imagine if someone say they came up to me and you and said, "Right, everyone knows we're big fans of Star Trek, apart from spy movies, of course," and they said, "Cam and Scott, we want you to write the next Star Trek film,"
Yeah,
and we are like, we've got this." And we think we've knocked it out of the park. We spend a year pouring our heart into the continuing adventures of the USS whatever, and then the studio gets it and tears it to shreds, and then the public blames us for it.
Yep. That's the curse of the screenwriter and the director is that sometimes things are taken out of their hands and butchered, and the public or critics, who do they point the finger at, right? Like it tends to be the people behind the scenes that made the film, whereas so many circumstances can corrupt that vision. Yeah,
I mean, these suits in offices are all sort of faceless, well, suits, so they don't. You're right; they don't get the blame. And again, slight off-topic segue, I suppose, but like, Quantum of Solace is a film that's being reappraised recently,
hmm
and people are saying it's not so bad. Now, I'm not joining that camp personally. I don't really have much of an opinion, but the reason I raise this is because us diving into this film is not some sort of way of saying, oh, Avengers is actually a really misunderstood film, and it's actually a really interesting film when you dig into it. I'm not saying that the delivered product wasn't good, but what's fascinating is knowing what the creative people came up with and what could have been, and that's what I've loved about having these two chats with Jeremiah and Don, is the passion that they put into these projects. And in some parallel universe, we could have had an Avengers franchise because it was just so good.
And that's one thing I think we've tried to do with the SpyMaster interviews is that we want to bring on people who also worked on movies we didn't care for, because we want to learn more about what was going on behind the scenes, how did these films happen, because we could easily sit down and talk about the Avengers, do a 90-minute episode, tear it to shreds, and be like, well, there you go. But it makes it a more interesting journey, I think, if we have our say, and then we let the people who made the movie come on and say, here's what I wanted to do, and here's why it didn't work. And suddenly we go, oh, well, that's a whole other conversation now, because between both the director and the writer, I don't know that there's many people that have done more work in terms of getting the narrative of the creation of the Avengers film to the world. Like for some reason, that's become our niche out of, I guess, just happenstance. It wasn't something we aspired to when we began this podcast, but we're very happy to be able to do it. And I would like people to have that takeaway of, oh, like maybe the movie I don't like, there's more complexities behind that story than just, well, they all screwed it up. Who knows? You know what I mean?
Well, I think that's a lesson for the modern times. Dig a little deeper.
Mm.
Find out how that sausage was made. But I think this was a good time. Obviously, this is the 23rd anniversary this film came out, and it sort of spurred us on to cover the film. It's also our 1 year anniversary, so it all sort of coincided at the same time. And some people will do like their favorite film on their 1 year anniversary or a really popular film. The Avengers isn't either of those things. But what it is an interesting study into the failings of Hollywood to utilize the talent of its people. You can tell that Don MacPherson had a really interesting story to tell, and he was able to adapt it from the very interesting but maybe hard to understand story that he had in the beginning to a more easy to grasp blockbuster film that he had by the end. But he did craft that, and it was the 2 hour version, from all intents and purposes, is a lot better. And then Jeremiah, took up that mantle and delivered a film from what it seems to be was a perfectly pleasant set. Everyone was enjoying themselves, and there was no dramas. So what failed was at the end, and that was in edit, and that was in politics. And so I think I'm glad we got the opportunity to delve into this film, maybe give it its retrospective. I know it's not its 25th anniversary, but hopefully we've we've created a definitive Avengers collection.
And if you're listening to this in the year 2023, you can celebrate the 25th anniversary with this series of interviews.
Yeah, let us know if you're enjoying this in the year 2023. I'm sure I'll still be tweeting. But again, we want to thank Don for taking the time to sit down with us and join us in our 1 year celebration, talking about 1998's Avengers, 23 years after the fact that it came out. Cam, what have we got coming up next week?
We have a very special episode. We are going to hold our first James Bond roundtable. This time, we are going to talk about the Brosnan era. What were its strengths? What were its minuses? Who were the best villains? We're going to talk all about it with a, I think, really interesting panel of guests. And we are going to break down the Pierce Brosnan James Bond era.
Yeah, this is an idea I kind of concocted. I kind of want to, when we finish an era, like you say, so the Brosnans in this case, I kind of want to sit down and really collectively analyze them as a series of films. And we'll do the same for, Connery's, Craig's, Moore's, all going down the line. The Lazenby one, we'll bunch that in with David Niven. But yeah, we've got a couple of great panelists that come at it from different angles, I would say, as well. And I think a couple of our previous Brosnan guests might be stopping by to say hello as well.
Very good. Very good.
That's right. So join us next week as we celebrate the Pierce Brosnan Bond films in style, in tuxedos, drinking martinis. You can, of course, follow us on social media discreetly at SpyHards. That's SpyHards on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. But until next week, listeners, good luck in an office full of teddy bears.